chapters 13 and 14 are combined in this series. Chapter 13, as you see, is vocal delivery, and chapter 14 is physical delivery. And even together, these are a little bit shorter than the last chapter we had. When you think of someone who's an engaging speaker, whether it's a professor you've had in the past, if it's a favorite talk show host, maybe you like listening to a podcast or a favorite comedian, maybe you have someone in your family or one of your friends who's just one of the best storytellers or joke tellers around. Usually speakers who are engaging have similar sets of qualities, and it's one of the things we can start working on in this class as well. So you've probably heard before, if someone speaks at a pretty fast rate, while sometimes it could be distracting, other times it might be really conveying enthusiasm. It all depends on the perception of the audience who's listening to it. When we're thinking in terms of volume, it's usually not too much of an issue in an online class. If you're choosing to record your speech, you'll test out the volume ahead of time. If we do something through Zoom, we're usually not hearing any distractions in that either. We'll talk about if microphones will be on mute or not. Usually in my classes from last semester after spring break, we actually didn't mute it just so that students could hear each other's reactions throughout. When we're talking about pitch, we're talking about how high or low the sound is of someone's voice. Another word for that is the register. Get it? The pitch? One of the best things about when we deliver our speeches extemporaneously, automatically the vocal variety comes with it. Get it? The steps. When we're extemporaneous, remember that means really well organized, but it sounds conversational. Our vocal variety just naturally goes up and down. Typically, it's a manuscript speech that will often sound more monotone because people feel a little bit too safe with their complete speech in front of them, verbatim, that delivery doesn't get enhanced through practice. But through the extemporaneous, that vocal variety is usually right on target, with practice, of course. When we talk about speaking for clarity, in this context, it's going to mean explaining our research, right? We never want to dumb something down. That's usually thinking of the audience in a less than fantastic way. But keep in mind, you're the expert on this, so you're going to be explaining things to us. When we talk about articulation, that means in terms of pronouncing the sounds. So instead of have to, it's have to. Instead of gonna, it's going to. We try to be as formal as we can in speeches. When I used to teach at Hofstra, I worked with a lot of broadcasting majors. And when I was working with students who are from Staten Island and from Brooklyn, oh gosh, did they have a lot of trouble with this part if they weren't used to saying their R's and INGs. With pronunciation, a lot of times this comes in with a research too. One of the greatest things about the internet is that you could click on the phonetics for how things sound. Fluency is the easiest one to work on. It's definitely the most time consuming. That comes with practice. But when we have good flow, that shows that we're sure of our thoughts and that the transitions are smooth throughout. The opposite of fluency is when we have the fillers and when it gets to the point of being distracting. The repeated ums, the repeated likes and whatnots. Sure, it might slip out from time to time, but as long as it's not in a repeated way, usually people will feel like someone else has pretty good fluency. The textbook goes into common causes for fluency hiccups. That's unique to our textbook. When we talk about hiccups, we're talking about things that don't flow well. So the most common one is lack of preparation. So when we start writing our outlines, you might even want to start practicing some of those main points to see how it sounds, how you like that flow. We usually don't have this issue in the Com 101 classes that I run because we do a combination outline and it's always the one that's for speaking. So you're going to have some parts, very few, that are in full sentences. Most of it's going to be in fragments. And that helps emphasize and enforce that extemporaneous delivery. So it's really well organized, but it sounds conversational. In terms of the poorly prepared speech outline, I'll be really honest, it usually doesn't happen in my classes, especially when people take me up on that rough draft conference. In terms of distractions, I always find students are very pleasant and very receptive to listening to their classmates. The biggest distraction that I've found over the years usually comes in more recent times with cell phones. And for instance, since this is a 4 to 6 minute speech, I'll always tell people, feel free to have your cell phones out. You can time yourself. Ideally, that's been done in practice too. A couple summers ago, it happened where there was a student who put the timer on her cell phone and it actually went off when she was up for time. I wasn't going to stop her, and that distracted herself. Another student once told me when he brought his phone up, he was getting ESPN breaking news about whatever sports he was tuned in for. So the distractions that I've been finding in class is usually the speaker, him or herself, and something to do with technology on their cell phone. So maybe you want to pause those text messages, breaking news, and have a running timer as opposed to the one that dials down. So that covers it in terms of the vocal delivery. When we move into the physical delivery, this textbook actually does not go into too much detail. And since most of the time you're going to be staying put where you're standing, to me, it's absolutely fine. The textbook concentrates mostly on facial expressions and eye contact. And when we talk about it through Zoom or a video recording, that's where we start to get strategic. Zoom eye contact is very different than when you're in a classroom. So for instance, right now I'm looking into the camera. But if I were to look down right now at the computer, it looks like I'm not making eye contact at all. If we do it through Zoom, typically what people like to do is look at everyone's friendly face on the Brady Bunch screen. That's also different than if you're looking at the camera. So we'll experiment with different ways. Everybody gets a chance to try it a couple minutes before their speech so you can see what's comfortable for you. We'll do it the same way in terms of where you would hold your outline for it. You can think about it in the same way with the video greeting. So I wanted everyone to get used to being seen. When we did it with the video greeting, depending on where you were looking, it might have looked like it was better eye contact, or it might have looked like that it was off to the side. And again, that was fine on your first try at it. Dress up with those guys and girls, of course. When the textbook moves into the body, and this is the last slide for this part of it, the textbook focuses on 4 main parts: on posture, gestures, movement, and personal appearance. Typically with posture, we want to make sure that we're standing tall. We want to make sure that we don't have any of those distracting nonverbal adapters that the textbook talks about, whether it's swinging, we talked in one of the other chapters, whether it's playing with a hair or fidgeting, but practicing to stay put in a solid stance. Typically, gestures come pretty naturally. I'm not strict on it in any kind of way. My suggestion is to practice your speech and see where you typically flow. Even if your arms were down the whole time, we'll talk about if you're going to be standing at your kitchen table and you have your outline pegged up by your computer. However you want to do it, we'll find a way to make it work. Again, in terms of movement, I actually find this part more distracting when we're in a classroom. Sometimes people want to pace around, it's that nervous energy, or maybe they want that immediacy to talk with a classmate. And rather than move all around, what I'll typically say, well, if you're going to move and pace, make a whole point here as you talk to one side of the room. Then when you're ready to move into the next part of it, well, you can turn your body around and walk to the next part of it. But typically, if we were in a classroom, we'd be standing behind a podium. Again, you'll think about how you want to do it, whether you have a desk or if it's your kitchen table or anything else. Anybody remember what we talked about in terms of personal appearance? You see what's going on over here? Like you're going out to dinner with your grandparents. So this concludes the part on physical delivery. Remember, there's an 8-page packet that's up in Blackboard if you want to start thinking about topics. If you don't want to think about it just yet, that's fine. We still have a few weeks. Enjoy the day. That's your delivery guy. Get it?